Have I tried reading any Japanese outside Duolingo? Weren't you here when you? Well, actually, you weren't here when I mentioned that I, um, read grade readers. I use grade readers. I'm pretty sure you were here when I said grade readers a bunch of times. I also read Japanese subtitles, so a lot of things have Japanese subtitles these days. Like vlogs, like comprehensible 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 input vlogs have Japanese subtitles in them, and not like the CC version. How is it compared to reading Duolingo Japanese? Honestly, it's about the same. It kind of feels the same. The downside is the downside is it's not guaranteed that grade readers and vloggers aren't doing it to accommodate non like language learners. So what I mean by that is I I'm I'm not I'm not sure. The vlogger that I know, he's framing his stuff around Genki. And then grade readers are kind of, framing around language learners. So the experience is about the same. And what I mean by that is there are things you know and things you don't know. One thing that is kind of different though, maybe one thing that's kind of different is more guesswork, right? More guesswork. And this is not this is my default. Guesswork is my default. So I'm naturally already inclined to do guesswork when I'm using Duolingo. Duolingo is not guesswork for most people. And just now you came back from some Hebrew practice, and a lot of people on Reddit is talking about how bad it is to even the natives. Yeah, it's horrible indeed. That sounds like confirmation bias. Confirmation bias. Annie. How do the people say it's bad? Can you explain that? How is it bad? Using, say, when you say lots of people, that is confirmation bias. It doesn't tell me anything about how it is bad. Like that doesn't explain anything. It's like a trust me bro situation, but you were unable to explain to me how is it bad to begin with. So it's kind of difficult to know regardless of how many people you read. I don't know how that doesn't explain anything to me. Copying a comment doesn't help unless it explains something, but go for it. And remember that I'm trusting you, not the however other people's comments, right? So anyways, I think it's a little bit different, granola. It's different, but more natural. In a funny way, I'm gonna use the word natural. And what I mean by natural is this is how I default learn. So I like grade readers. I like grade readers and vloggers in the sense that I don't have to spend energy plant engaging myself, right? So one of the challenges of Duolingo is to remain engaged in Duolingo because it has a really high comprehension or comprehensibility. At least for Japanese, it has a really high comprehensibility. So when I go to read grade readers and vloggers, a lot more of my energy is devoted to guessing. using deductive reasoning. So I like that quite a bit. Like, I don't know what this word means, but it clearly has something to do with X, Y, and Z. Because when you're doing grade readers, you're reading comprehensively, but you're not reading for accuracy. And what I mean by that is you're not reading for totality of knowledge. So there's going to be naturally things you don't know and things you do know. And most of the things you do know, however, the most interesting things are all the things you don't know. And I like that. That's my natural place. When you're using Duolingo, you know everything. So most of the time I spend thinking about the things I may not know. I think about things that are not clear to me most of the time. And that's like talking about grammar, if situations, if I can do this and that. Or imagine myself in a situation where I would use these words, right? Use these. You found that having to guess for even one or two words in a sentence really mess up the entire sentence's comprehension. I see. Is that like a general comment, or is that something you feel is unique to language learning? Let me explain. Hebrew has something called MAKU, that is basically the dots that sign to you the vowel sounds the letters has. So when you start learning the Hebrew, they don't help you as in Japanese. That's fine. It's different. That's all I can tell you. Like, that still doesn't scream to me how it's terrible. That you have the option to see the romanization of Niku is absolutely necessary, so you just have to guess the sound without knowing about the Niku, which is dumb because they don't teach it anything about it. The explanations are not efficient, just doesn't exist. Okay. So you want that. That's fair. You want that. I don't know if that's horrible or not. Some people literally raw dog the memorization. So you want something to alleviate how much effort you need, in my opinion, to remembering them. You don't understand how bad it is. Even native Israelis are saying that it's not practical. All right, then don't use it, Fanny. But I actually do not see a pragmatic reason for other than you want more explanations. Imagine you starting Mandarin without tones. Basically it. I would start Mandarin without tones. 90% word comprehension but 0% meaning comprehension. I see. I think it's unique to Japanese. Just wondering if you experience the same things. Oh, okay. You think it's unique that if you miss one word, you can no longer comprehend the meaning? That's an interesting thought. Is it unique to Japanese? I don't feel the same way when it comes to comprehension, but I think you're meaning on a sentence to sentence basis. Like, for example, and remember that you won't learn how to read Mandarin without tones. I disagree with that. I totally disagree with that. If you're suggesting that people don't learn things without structure, how do kids learn? That's just not true. That's literally fundamentally not true. Like, not even trying to make an argument for adults. Like, if you're talking about adults only, that's perfectly fine. But what you just said was absolutely not true. Like, it is literally not true. Because you can always attach a memory of a sound to a representation of it. That is like, I don't even know how to process that. The idea that what you just said. that you can't learn something without tones. You hear a tone and you ascribe to it symbolism. It sucks, I can tell you that. You know how to write, not how you know how to write, not how does it sound. I can't write Mandarin. I know how it sounds though. You can write things without knowing how it sounds. If you have a sound and you attach it to writing, but imagine I was a beginner. We were all beginners at some point. It's like saying you can't start. If you can't start, how did you acquire your first language? Exactly. And they did. Like, I literally did it on day 2. But hey, you can convince yourself, in my opinion, but what you say is not real, in my opinion. Like, of all the things I could agree with you, it's hard to guess sounds. Sure. It's hard to guess sounds by like, oh, hey, you click on something, this is how it sounds. All right, I'll remember that next time. Right? I'll remember that next time. Now you do less guessing. And then I'll remember that next time. You do even more less guessing. But you can hear the sound. Hebrew Duolingo doesn't even have sound in this sentence. Then you ascribe something else to it. So if it doesn't have sound, right? If it doesn't have sound, go ascribe something to it. Technically, here's an example. I'm a Japanese beginner, right? I'm a beginner in Japanese because I already did this. And then there's like some, I don't know, some word like sushi, right? Sushi. Technically, even if I don't know what it's supposed to sound like, I'm going to say, okay, I don't know. I have my first language. This is, okay, sushi, right? In English. In English. That's not the sound that sushi is. That's not the sound. According to a Japanese person, this is terrible because it's not the right sound for this representation. Or they can throw like this at me before I even knew what this is. They can throw this at me. I'm like, all right, I'm gonna call it TL. I'm gonna call it TL from now on. What does TL mean? I don't know. If they say, if they written it, no sound, right? No sound. If they written it and say no sound, oh, this equals a picture of a fish. All right, well, officially, I'm going to be calling TL as a fish. All right, from now on, I'm going to pronounce this sound, this, whatever this is, as TL. And whenever I think of TL, I'm going to think of a fish. I mean, it's not the same meaning. It's not going to capture the same meaning. But the question you're saying is, it's terrible to learn Hebrew accurately. Like, I understand that. Yes. Yes. It's terrible to learn Hebrew accurately. I got that. I totally get that. You said, how could someone learn without those things? That's not true. That is not true. So I totally understand the frustration that you're having about like learning Hebrew without and stuff. And yeah, it's you don't have to be a native speaker to really know that. But that's fine. But don't make to me, I can't resonate with absolute statements like you can't learn because you have no prior knowledge. That is absurd. No prior knowledge means you can't possibly learn. So how do you learn in the first place? How do you learn in the first place? It's like saying the world doesn't have a beginning, so therefore you can't exist. Yet you do exist. Well, you learned something without any prior knowledge. And you might even learn it inaccurately, quote unquote, inaccurately. Like, people can spend their entire lives learning a word inaccurately. Or saying a word incorrectly the whole time with no semblance of meaning and stuff. You form associations in a void, regardless, in my opinion. So, sorry that Hebrew sucked. And then you've convinced yourself it sucked too. And then all the other natural speakers think it sucks. Fair enough. I won't touch Hebrew. There you go. I won't touch Hebrew. Trying to strip me of everything that I have doesn't prove a point. Like, Mandarin has sort of a romanticization. It actually makes it a little bit difficult. But immediately learning how the markers worked, which doesn't exist in English. This is a X letter without whatever Nikud is, okay? It can sound like E-U-A-E-O. Guess it. As a beginner, I'll start with E. That's it. I'll start with E. Okay, from now on, E, whatever this is ascribed to this. You've learned in association. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying like it's a good way to learn or it's a bad way to learn. This is true. Is it accurate? It's probably not. So I go out, right? And then you're saying like, so how do you learn? It's not practical. Fine, that's exceptional. It's not practical as Mandarin, Duolingo, and Japanese. That's true. I agree. That's what you're saying. That's true. That's fair. I think it's probably not as practical as Japanese, Mandarin Duolingo, and Japanese Duolingo. That's fair. And just so you know, Mandarin Duolingo is different from Japanese Duolingo. So just as your comment, your constant generalization of picking something better and worse, because you're doing this like weird apples and oranges comparison, these two are very different too. So, and I'm still saying it's different since it's absent. I mean, they help you with all you need to know. Yes. Yes. Kind of. So if your world is this is all you need to know as a beginner, right? As a beginner, do you actually know this is all you need to know? Now, this is where I trust the other people, like the people that you said are native speakers, right? They probably like know a bigger, their perspective is probably bigger, right? So that's fair enough. To help you as a A1, yeah, I understand. All right, awesome. You proved your point. I have no problems about agreeing with you about the things you need, right, to learn Hebrew, right? But you don't require them to learn. Like that's a whole different story. I think that's a really reductive way of saying you can't take something that Duolingo has and add to it. And then you can't take something that Duolingo does and test it. Right? If you're solely, once again, solely reliant on one source of information, then I totally understand. That's understandable. If your whole universe is Duolingo, then yeah, Duolingo has to provide all you need to know. All you need to know. Absolutely. If Duolingo is your universe, yeah. Obviously, I don't think that, and I hope you don't think that as well. Duolingo doesn't teach me everything in C. Like no way. It teaches me everything in Japanese and Chinese that I need to know. It's not even close. So that phrasing is, it helps you with all you need to know. It doesn't. It really doesn't. That's Duolingo's, one of Duolingo's weaknesses is actually most of the time it doesn't do this. You're talking about it teaches you how to get the right answers. Or the answers they want. And Hebrew is not doing that. And I totally agree. Based on your description, Hebrew is not doing that. It's not helping you get the right answers that it wants, right? So you're not like, you're constantly guessing, checking. It's not teaching you how to get the right answers. I can understand that. And if it like takes hearts away from you and slow you down, yeah, it's basically, practically, impractical. So like, for example, I can imagine they'll show you an icon and you probably have 4 answers or 5 answers, right? Yeah, I understand. Because of hearts. I totally get that. Because what happens is you're gonna have to spend on average, right, of hearts to finally get to the right answer. I totally get that. So the system for Duolingo kind of sucks for that. But rest assured, the thing I'm illustrating here is if the worst scenario I can think of is where Duolingo doesn't provide any answers. Like this stuff, it's non-existent. Like this stuff is non-existent. If it's non-existent, then you can almost never get the right answer. However, so many video games that are incredibly hard kinda relies on the thing you just described. Here's a boss. You have no context whatsoever. Maybe you can bring in some rules, right, from other things like, hey, a sword is used for slashing or something, right? Or maybe a non-gamer, right? So how does a non-gamer understand the concept of HP? Trial and error. So it's not practical for language learning. I understand. Trial and error. However, a lot of humans learn this way a lot of times. It's not to excuse Duolingo though. I don't excuse Duolingo. I think that sounds horrible because of the heart system. And then the heart system then is going to force you to practice. It's going to force you to practice. And practice will lead to more guessing, which ultimately will still work. But it would be more easier if they had a system like Mandarin tones that you can see in the romanization. Is there? I don't know. Right? Mandarin exists because there's a system of pinging. But even I didn't know pinging can be applied to Fujianese. So there are language learning where you don't use romanization or any form of surrogate sound system. You pick it up through trial and error. That's horrible, by the way. It's a horrible way. It's kind of like going to a country and immersing with no point of reference. This is my criticism for total immersion. You just described total immersion with low comprehensibility. Most of us as kids learn this way though, because we have no point of reference. But at one point, most of us learn by total immersion. However, as adults, yeah, I totally agree with you. It sucks. We need points of references. Like whatever your common tongue is. In this case, English, because of romanization, right? But yeah, learning Hebrew, learning Hebrew unaided, that sounds like kind of sucks. Yeah. Fair enough. Fair enough. Learn Hebrew somewhere else. If I am going, maybe I'll learn Hebrew. I don't know. Say what you're describing is what they're doing. I would probably deliberately, so if my first prompt is this, say they give you four choices. Like a video game, I'm gonna, instead of thinking about it at all, I'm gonna pick one. It's wrong. I'm gonna pick two. It's wrong. I'm gonna pick three. It's wrong. I lost 3 hearts. Now I have 2 hearts left, right? And then I pick this. I'll remember it and associate it. Okay, I only have 2 hearts. Let's go to practice. That doesn't consume any hearts, by the way, when you practice. So they're gonna give me whatever prompts like this. So let's say whatever the symbol is. I don't know what the symbols are in. And then they're going to present me with more things. I'm going to literally just click my way through, find the right answer, associate it. And then I'll get 3 hearts now because I got 1 heart set. Because if you go through all the prompts, you're going to gather, mix and match through trial and error, through however many you can farm. So say they still do the like 10 elements. Usually in the beginning, like in Mandarin, they introduce 10 elements. I'll try to farm by literally bootstrapping as fast as I can, and then find those 10, write them down or memorize them in my head, and then proceed to do this bootstrapping until I've found all the right matches. And then I move on like that. If the big if is if I am only using Duolingo. So you have no other system to rely on other than your logic. So your logic dictates I find the fastest way to basically guess my way through everything as fast as I can because I don't have anything to deduce anything. Like there's no way to better deduce. So you limit the amount of time you're deducing. And then eventually, after you form a basis of something, right? Maybe you get through section unit. I don't know how many units. Maybe you get through 3 units. Then I look at all my patterns and I look at all my associations. So they're raw associations, like X is equals some random icon, Y equals some random icon. Can I see a pattern? Can I see a pattern? It could be no. So I continue to bootstrap. Other than that, that's how video games work. Right. When you get thrown into a puzzle game, the designer could give you 0 clues. They could choose to give you 0 clues. Oftentimes the puzzle doesn't even tell you what the possible answers are. Right? They give you rules, but don't show you the answers. In Duolingo, they give you the beginning, whatever X is, and then they give you the possible answers. So naturally, the most pragmatic way of approaching this is just to guess until you find the right answer and then write it down and move along, right? Then you build up a whole bank of answers to the correlation, and then you bootstrap that to form your foundations. Is that going to help you learn Hebrew later on? Like, does Hebrew have a system where you like combine things and there's an obvious pattern? I have no idea because I don't learn Hebrew. But my first mechanical understanding of how to break down the game is you don't get penalized because you can always get more hearts. And the practice of heart farming also gives you more chances at guessing. So my most optimized way of approaching this is to guess incredibly rapidly to get all the right answers while heart farming as well, and then proceed to complete the course that way. If I need to beat Duolingo with no form of reference or audio and just rely solely on pattern recognition and writing, that would be my approach. However, you don't have to do that. So it's kind of nice. It's terrible because you know there's something outside of Duolingo. It's also terrible because you know there's other Duolingo things that doesn't do what this Duolingo thing does. So you can compare it to other things that operate on different rules. That makes it a lot easier to criticize something for what it is versus criticizing on what you wish it is. So that's kind of what I'm illustrating here, in my opinion. It doesn't mean you can't learn from it, or no one can learn from it. It's often you see a bigger picture, right? There are other things that are unlike this, and therefore you prefer to learn it that way. Sometimes my biggest example is this here. I spend so much time compared to someone who just memorizes by picking the same patterns. So they understand nothing. They can choose to understand nothing, but still get the right answer. So if you're telling me that you need to know and hear and stuff, the answer is no. You can learn and do things without knowing anything. Through trial and error. It is possible. It's not ideal though. I absolutely agree. It's not ideal. That's kind of defeats some of the purpose of having a language that connects people and communicate with people. Can you beat Duolingo and learn something from it without any audio and any type of writing? Yeah. Can you build Hebrew associations where there isn't any? Well, there isn't any sound, so it's not going to help you there. It's obvious that it has no sound. Uh, can you learn to write in Hebrew by trial and error? You absolutely can. Not ideal, though. Very not ideal. Understandable. Right. That's kind of one of the things that Duolingo struggles with. If the purpose is teaching the language, the minimal they can do is make it easier, as they said to us to learn. Yeah, I agree. Or make it easier. Yeah, make it easier. The funny thing is, you're picking Japanese. Sometimes, like, your Japanese is a point of reference. I think they do too much in Japanese. Like, my personal take, they tell you too much. Or they hold your hand way too much. They tell and hold your hand way, yeah, easier. Yeah. They definitely try to make it easier. I agree with you. I think Hebrew sounds terrible right now because they haven't made it easier. In my opinion, they more aids for sure. However, Japanese, I think they're doing too much. It's too much. It's too simple, right? It's too simple. It's not complex enough. That kind of thing. Where, like, there needs to be sentences where you're trying to figure things out. However, Granola makes an interesting point. Granola finds that if you need to do some guesswork, and it might be unique to Japanese, I haven't experienced this yet, but for, like, maybe complex topics, like, if you need to guess one or two words, the comprehension kind of falls apart. So maybe that's unique to Japanese, where Duolingo feels like it must be compelled to maintain a high comprehension, right? Comprehension for most people. I actually don't know that. For me, when I feel like I don't understand anything anymore, it's like 70%. The moment I drop 70% below, it feels like all the paragraphs are mushy. Like, I can no longer put together an explainer or a guess. Would you like it to be complicated? Here's the thing. Is this gonna sound weird? This is gonna sound like a cop-out. I'm sorry if this is gonna be a cop-out. I don't want many things. Like, I don't want anything or like it to be anything. I typically work and solve things. So in a way, yes. In a way that if it's complicated, it challenges me to try harder. It challenges me to try harder. And oftentimes, you know, when I'm trying harder, I apply myself more. So, for example, I know you said that Hebrew is terrible, but some part of me thinks of it as a challenge to try to optimize a learning method for language by trial and error. The downside is I don't have time for it, right? Some things that are easy is time efficient, and things that are hard are often time inefficient. So do I want Japanese to be more inefficient? Yeah, sure. Because if Japanese is more complicated, then I'm gonna stop yapping more. Honestly, though, I wouldn't trade up yapping. So all this discussion and stuff, because Japanese handholds you in Duolingo, is why we're having this conversation. Like, I like talking about Hebrew and other courses and whatnot, is because no matter how distracted I am, I already know the right answer to this. I can't possibly, you know, like, if I listen to this enough, I get the right answer, right? So I'm not expending a lot of energy paying attention to any of this. So to me, I'm not working very hard. And I think that's one of the downfalls of Duolingo Japanese. At some point, people stop working. They just don't do anything. Like, you're just getting streaks. You can get answers without even looking at it. You can get answers without ever listening to it. You can get answers without, like, there's so many ways to get the right answer. And it's funny because now you finally landed on the other extreme, where they literally only give you the right answers, the potential right answer, and all wrong answers. Like, every other answer is wrong, basically. So it's it would be kind of fun to build up the logic. It reminds me of a puzzle game, basically. A puzzle game has often a few solutions, a few, if not just one, right? And you're thrown into the world with zero knowledge. You have no idea. In fact, a lot of times puzzle games attack your existing knowledge. So they would try to design rules that are counterintuitive to even punish you for relying on outside knowledge. Like, for example, what goes up must come down, but they can remove those rules and then make you find out that that's not the rule anymore, right? So lots of puzzle games, although they're not lifelong like language things that you want, right? These skills are encapsulated in the puzzle game. So it kind of reminds me of a puzzle game, which kind of defeats the purpose of learning, like defeat the intent of learning Hebrew. But it's kind of interesting all at the same time. The answer is probably, I lean towards yes. I'm gonna say 60% yes and 40% no in terms of the list to make Japanese more complicated. And what I mean by that is at some point, like for example, say like section 1 gives you audio, they won't give you any text. Your whole goal is to get used to hearing Japanese without any text, right? And then another section would be you get rid of all audio. You get rid of all audio, right? You get rid of all audio, and now you are tasked to connecting what you think you heard to the representations, and then you go back and forth until you literally make the connection between the sound and what the writing is. Obviously, Hebrew doesn't have this, so I agree that that's awful because one branch of it is missing. So there are many ways to make Japanese more complicated without changing anything that they have. It makes it more complicated because it forces the person to bridge the gap instead of providing it. It's like, this is what kono is, right? And then they provide with you, this is what kono is. But a lot of people actually say, oh, I don't need romaji. Heck with the romaji, I'm just gonna go in raw. Actually, some people go straight to kanji. Does that help or not? I don't know. There's gonna be gaps, right? Gaps. And I like being comprehensive. I do like comprehensive. Hi, I just finished studying Japanese and taking notes for 5 hours. I'm happy to see you live. Oh, hey! Hello there, Neo. 5 hours? Dang. Like 5 hours taking notes. That's crazy. Is there anything interesting that you can share with me, Neo? We were talking about some very interesting thing about Hebrew. So how else are you gonna learn Hebrew, Fanny? What are you gonna do now for learning Hebrew? I think a reasonable strategy for me is I basically leave Duolingo, right? And use it as review only. So I probably go and learn Hebrew somewhere else and then see if I can guess or use Hebrew as the raw input. So Duolingo, the purpose of Duolingo now is for total recall. Is for total recall only. You'll keep up with a section to learn Hebrew letters. Oh, that's interesting. If you know what I mean. So I would probably take like Hebrew elsewhere that have sound and stuff. And then the Souls game is Duolingo because it has nothing. It doesn't provide anything, right? So now it's the perfect tool to total recall. As in, if Duolingo doesn't provide you with anything, like minimally anything, then preparing yourself outside and then coming in and say like, oh yeah, now I know all these things. It's like, all right, Duolingo strips of everything but the potential right answer, right? So you can continue to use Duolingo, but now you're not working against it. You're working with it. So every time you see something that's like question mark, I have no idea, you go outside and learn about it, which would be pretty cool. I think that would be a way to make Duolingo work. If we're expanding and including all the different tools you can use.